In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. So today the gospel reading speaks about two healings. One of a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years, and the other of a young girl who dies, and Christ raises her from the dead. Now there's a few miracles that Christ does in his lifetime where people are raised from the dead. This girl is one of them. Lazarus is one of the other ones that really is prominent in our minds, as well as Christ himself, who raises from the dead. But I want to spend some time just explaining who he takes on the road. So now if you think of Christ, he's there, he's walking, and there's a lot of people around. This lady bumps into him, and he says, "Somebody bumped into me." And they said, "Yeah, no kidding. There's people everywhere." And he said, "No, I feel like something happened to me, like power went out of me." And then the woman comes, trembling. You can just imagine. She's healed, and Christ is looking around like saying, "Who did that?" And she knows it was her. So she comes forward, and she explains everything, as the gospel says. It doesn't go into the details, but it says that she explains her life. And then Christ says to her, "Your faith has made you well. Go on your way." Now, who was there with him was the ruler of the synagogue, whose daughter was dying. Peter, James, and John are there. And we don't know, probably the mother of the girl was not there. She was probably still at the home. So then, as this is happening and as he's making his way, one of the people from the synagogue come back and say that don't bother the teacher anymore. Don't bother Christ because your daughter's dead. And Christ still goes. But the interesting part of this is he says no one can go inside the house except Peter, James, and John, and the mother and father. So Peter, James, and John, as we know, are the three that Christ singles out of the disciples over and over. He takes them to the Transfiguration. He takes them here to see something more extraordinary than the other disciples were allowed to see. They see Christ transfigured into light and seeing his divinity, and they also see this miracle of Christ being at the bedside of this dead girl and raising her. But the interesting part of this gospel that kind of wrenches me as I read it every time is the fact that they go there and they said, "She's dead," and Christ goes, "She's not dead, she's just sleeping." And then what does the gospel say? They laughed at him. They laughed at him, knowing that she was already dead. They laughed at Christ. His three chosen ones, the mother and father, and they think that after all they've seen, and they just came from this healing of this woman with the blood flow for 12 years, and she says, "No one could heal me. No one. All the doctors, I spent all my money, all that stuff, it's all gone, and Christ was the one that heals." And they saw it. They saw all these miracles. They saw it. And then they look at him and they say, are you kidding me? And to be written that they laughed at him. What kind of demeanor did the disciples have, and what kind of demeanor do we have sometimes by laughing at God and saying, "Yeah, right." Really second-guessing God and saying, "Yeah, okay, you say you're God, and we confess you as God, but do we really believe it, is the question. Do we really believe why we're here, and do we really believe what God can do?" And the answer to that question is sometimes yes, sometimes no. And we see that as the example throughout history, throughout the biblical history, that the disciples are there and they're like, "Yes, who am I?" Christ says to Peter, "Who do people say I am?" "Some say you're a prophet," Peter says. "Some say you're Elijah. Some say you're John the Baptist." And then Christ says, "Who do you say I am?" And he says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And then Christ stops. There's that confession of faith. You are the Son of God. Peter says that to Christ, but yet Peter's there and he's laughing at Christ, saying, "Are you kidding me? She's dead. And you're going to say that she's sleeping? What is this, some kind of joke? Are you just tormenting this woman and this man of the synagogue?" The synagogue ruler. Now here's a guy, if you think about it, the ruler of the synagogue is going against what the synagogue was teaching because he's following Christ. So how long was he going to be the ruler of the synagogue? Not long. If not, he became, if he didn't become a martyr shortly after that. Because what does Christ say? They will kick you out of the synagogues. They will mock you. They will beat you. Some of you will die for my name. So what's this ruler of the synagogues living on the edge by saying, you got to come to my house, Christ, because I know that you're God. So the confession of faith is there in the ruler. But yet he goes there, and the girl's dead, and again, he's one of the ones laughing. Yet he is the one that went to find Christ on the road and said, I need you to heal my daughter. So where is it in our minds where we draw the line when Christ works and when he doesn't work? That's really what this gospel reading is about our own limitations as human beings to try and wrap our mind around restraining God even more and saying, yes, he can work in this situation. Oh, he can't work in that situation. Anytime you pass the class in grade school or whatever, you're like, thank you, God, for helping me pass that class. But when you failed, you're like, why didn't God help me pass the test? What was he doing? Was he busy with somebody else? When we get through a bad illness or whatever, we say, God carried me through this and got me through this. And then when we don't, we're like, why isn't God listening to my prayers? Why is so-and-so dying at an early age? Why am I dying? Or whatever the issue is. And we constrain God and say that he can only work when we think he can work. And that's the problem with the gospel reading today, is that you have the disciples there, the three chosen ones, the three kind of at the top of the pyramid of the ones who understood Christ, and they are determining in their minds when God can work and when God can't work, and really limiting the power of God. And they laughed at him. If you think about that, laughing at Christ for him saying something that still they didn't understand. And if you think of the disciples, really, and you read their lives carefully, prior to Pentecost, they look like a bunch of fools. They do. But you know what the interesting thing is? They mirror everything that we think in our heads. They mirror it. And that was before Pentecost. But they say the same questions that we would say. Are you kidding me? I mean, can you imagine that? If by some reason I was at a funeral and you were all here and there was somebody in the parish and I was up and I came up and I said, don't worry, they're just sleeping. He'd say, well, Father, it's time for a new priest. He's got to go. Something happened. He snapped a rod in his head or something. And then by some chance that person raises from the dead through prayers or through the laying on of hands, whatever. You say, well, what does that mean? Because you know what the thing is? We all do that to each other too. We don't just do it to God. But in your heads, you probably have a definition of what I can do and what I can't do as a priest. You probably have a definition of what you can do and can't do as a Christian. Yeah, I can pray for people, but I can't work a miracle. Yeah, Father's a nice guy or whatever, but he's not going to heal anybody. He can't do that. You don't know. And the other thing too is Christ doesn't advertise miracles. You don't advertise miracles. I don't advertise miracles. Have miracles happened in this church? Yes. Have they happened to you? Yes. Have they happened through the sacraments or through oil? Absolutely. Have they happened with oil that I have? Absolutely. But you don't go around saying, well, I got 14 miracles and 3 healings and 2 exorcisms under my belt, and look at that. Look how great that is. What does Christ do at the end of the gospel reading? He raises her from the dead, and what does he say? The last words, don't tell anybody. Why? Because he doesn't want everyone going around saying, oh, Christ will heal you, and it's like, it becomes like a drive-through. Just imagine. And we don't even have to imagine. There's been miraculous icons that are throughout the United States. And what happens? It becomes like a line of people. I need to go to the icon because I got to be healed. And then people go there. Some people are healed. Some people aren't healed. And then they say, that's a joke. It's a gimmick. Or whatever it is. And then the people that are healed, it's like, well, why are they healed and I'm not? What did I do wrong? And we constantly are trying to wrap our minds around how God works. Are we all going to receive miracles? No. Have we all received miracles? Yes, we have. But are we going to receive the miracles as we want them? Probably not. But God does work. But he doesn't work in the way that we try to limit him to work. And that's something we have to always think about. Is when we try to put God in our mentality, we do God a disservice. If you try to understand, as St. Gregory of Palamas says, if you try to understand the essence of God, what makes God God, and purport to know that, you're a fool. There's no way you can know what makes God God. And there's no way that we can know what makes God decide to do what he's going to do. All we can do is follow him with faith, with love, with fear, and with devotion. But in the gospel reading today, we hear about the disciples, his chosen ones, the ruler of the synagogue, the mother of this girl, sitting there and laughing in the face of Christ. We need to make sure that we don't do that in our lives, that we don't laugh in the face of Christ when we come to a situation where we ask for something or we're looking at something and we say, God can't even do that. And I'm sure you have people in your lives where you say, there's no way that God is going to change them. There's no way that God is going to make my boss be a better person or a relative or whatever in your life. There's no way that's going to happen. And we look and we say, yeah, we shrug our shoulders and we scoff at people saying, come on, there's nothing that's going to happen. They're going to die miserable. They're going to die alone. They're going to, whatever the case is. We draw the line on what God's going to do and what he's not going to do. But we have to be open to say, let God do whatever he's going to do. But for goodness sake, do not laugh in his face. Do not try and constrain God and say when he's going to work and when he's not going to work. If you give up on asking God, sometimes people will say to me, well, how often do I pray for a miracle? All the time. Aren't we all praying for miracles in different ways? To wake up in the morning, isn't that a miracle? To keep breathing, isn't that a miracle? A child is a miracle. There's so many things in our lives that are miracles. So should we keep praying for miracles? Absolutely. Are we guaranteed that we're going to receive a miracle in the way that we are looking for it? No. Are we guaranteed to receive the answer to a prayer in the way we're looking for it? No. But what God does is he answers all prayers and he grants us miracles, but a lot of times we don't even see what they are because we're looking so far past what we're supposed to see what God has put in front of us. And I always tell people, the best way to understand how we limit God is with one finger. You could take one finger. Now, if you're looking at me, okay? Everybody hopefully is looking at me, or you're noodle necking or whatever the thing is. If you take that finger, your index finger, please, and you hold it up and you stare at your index finger and put it in front of me or in front of anybody. You could do this. I mean, nobody's going to arrest you or anything. You can put your finger up and you focus on your finger, okay? Don't take your eye off your finger. Am I still in focus? If I am, then your eyes are, going two different ways. But if you're staring at your finger, you're not focusing on whatever's past you. And if you're staring at your answer, if you think that's your only answer in life, and that's the only thing you're focused on, you're going to miss everything else going around you. And the only time you realize that is when you're taking photographs. And you're like zooming, and now with cameras you can be a complete monkey and just push the button and it focuses on people's faces and it makes it look much better. But a real camera, you have to focus on what it is. You're going to focus on the leaf, you're going to focus on the background, you're going to focus on the person in the front. What are you going to choose to look at? And it takes time to adjust the lens. But with God, what are we looking for? We have to have the broad panoramic view to see everything and look around on how God is going to come to us and how he is going to answer our prayers, how he's going to bring us a miracle. And don't pigeonhole God into, he's right here, and this is my only answer. This is the only thing I can receive. Because that's what happened in the gospel reading today. The only answer is don't bother Christ anymore. That's what they said. Don't bother him, she's dead. Which means he can't do anything once somebody dies. So even though they believe in God, they don't believe in life after death. They don't believe that Christ's power transcends life itself. So don't get hung up on that one point that you think God's going to answer. Let God do what he's going to do. Don't interfere with him. Don't laugh at him. Don't expect him to answer everything exactly the way you want. And remember that he's there for us. And if you receive the miracles, if you've been blessed in many ways, don't wear it on your sleeve and say, oh, look at me. God did this for me. Because it might not happen for somebody else. And then what does it make you look like? In God's eyes, it makes you look like a gloater and a person. And nobody likes anyone like that. Nobody likes anyone who sits and pontificates about how great they are. No one enjoys that. And especially when it comes to things that are with our soul. It's all very personal. It's all very private. And that's why Christ said, only 3 of you come in, close the door, and let me do this in private. And let me heal her in private. And what does he do? He doesn't yell at them for laughing. He just says, rise. And then he says to the parents, give her something to eat. Why? Because she's really alive and she's hungry. And move on. And don't say anything about anything. He doesn't judge them. He doesn't condemn them and say, why would you laugh at me? Why would you laugh at the Son of God? He doesn't say that. He says, give her something to eat and keep your mouths closed about what happened here. And then what does he do? Goes out, goes on his way, and just think about it. For the rest of their lives, Peter, James, John, Jairus, his wife, and this girl knew what happened. And they kept that in their heart. And it changed them. But you never hear Peter recalling it. You never hear James or John recalling it or writings from Jairus. They kept it quiet, and they appreciated what God was. And it was one of those things that snapped them into the rails, along with the transfiguration, that said, okay, this is who God is, and this is what we should be thinking instead of what we were thinking before. So if you don't get anything else out of today, don't ever laugh at God thinking that you have the answers above what he has. Amen.